Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. Joining me once again is my co-host Richie Schneiderite and a very special guest, former Western Michigan great quarterback Zach Terrell. Zach, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And you may know him from their incredible run from 2013 to 2016, especially that 2016 season. But he had Kirk Ciarrocca as his offensive coordinator for his 4 years or I guess you were there for 5 years, but your last 4 years at Western Michigan. The years that you started at quarterback. So who better to talk to about this offense and about Kirk Ciarrocca than one of his greatest pupils. So Zach, thanks again for joining the pod. Let's just get right into it. So you guys, Western Michigan isn't known for like a football hotbed, but your guys like class there, your 4 years there, you guys produced a ton of NFL talent. What was it about Kirk Ciarrocca and the rest of the coaching staff there that really developed you guys ready to hit the ground running at the next level?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a combination of a few different things. Obviously you have to have a head coach with vision and leadership, and PJ Fleck is one of the best, in my opinion, at recruiting first and foremost, but also, getting everybody to get all in on one particular vision. And Coach Ciarrocca was a great at also articulating that same vision and following it up. And then, there's a few things that I really respect about Coach Ciarrocca. There's things that, in my opinion, separate him. He's, adaptable with his personnel, which I think is incredible and is very difficult to do as an offensive coordinator. His fundamental and discipline and teaching and how he, teaches the game and instructs and, holds his players accountable is second to none. I think that his influence over an offense and their ability to control the ball, time of possession is impressive. He preaches the ball as the program. And if you look at studies year in and year out, the most successful teams control the ball and they don't turn the ball over. And those are the two things that he's the best at doing. And then, he's become kind of a little bit of a guru in the RPO game, which is exciting and has obviously taken the college football game by storm. And even a little bit more the pros now. So those are kind of like the highlights when I think of Coach Ciarrocca that really impressed me with him as an offensive coordinator. Obviously, there's a lot of other things, but I think I think the world of him, and I think you guys got a really, really good offensive coordinator.
So let's start from right from the beginning. You committed and signed to Western Michigan in the class of 2012. 2013, obviously, new regime comes in. What was that relationship like? How did he just start building it from the beginning, I guess?
So I think he did a great job of kind of, peeling the onion back, right? And finding out where we were at a base level. And we were not good at all at Western. Our talent level was really, really bad. So he had to start all the way back, at square one. And I think that's one thing that I really, really like about Coach Ciarrocca is he doesn't, there's no such thing as overcoaching, right? He's not going to leave a stone unturned. So he's going to make sure that the fundamentals are first and foremost. And that's one thing that's often overlooked is a lot of these college coaches, and you'd be surprised, but they overlook the fundamentals. And you see that on the football field. When you watch Minnesota play the last few years, you notice that their fundamentals were second to none. Not a lot of turnovers, not a lot of flags or penalties. And that a lot of that comes down to coaching and attention to detail. He talks about it every single day, attention to detail, repetition. He believes in repping everything the right way over and over again until you can't possibly do it wrong in the heat of the battle. That's a direct quote from Kirk Ciarrocca. He said it so many times, I can replay it back to you. So I think that's what he was really good at early on is identifying, hey, where we're at and where we need to go in order to get where we needed to get to. And he's not going to put more on these young guys' plates or a lot of these players' plates until they're ready for it. And he's good at knowing when the right time to give them more and continue to add. But that fundamentals and details that he preaches and how he operates is going to be critical for your guys' success as an offense.
For sure. So we have a very similar situation where, we haven't had the most success with offense in a while at Rutgers. And we also have a quarterback room that's very young. Obviously, when Ciarrocca came into Western Michigan, you were coming off a redshirt season. So you were a redshirt freshman. So what was it like that first year under Ciarrocca, that QB battle, and ultimately you ended up winning the job? So what was that like? How was he teaching all the different guys and not trying to show favoritism, but also make sure the best guy got on the field?
Yeah, he was really good at that because I didn't start as the starter We had a fifth-year
Okay.
senior who had played some games, who started our first game versus Michigan State. And to be frank, I mean, he was the right man for the job. I did not win the job going into the season. So, but I never felt like he overlooked any of the quarterbacks. Like, he was always coaching. It wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to coach number 1 and forget about 2, 3, and 4. He understands the importance of depth. And that's why we were so good in 16 was the depth aspect, right? So I think I would be really encouraged if I was a young player and getting an opportunity. And maybe if you aren't the starter on day 1, he's still going to coach you and grow and develop. And every year was a competition, you know. He brought in Joe Flacco's younger brother for my last 2 years. You know, we brought in a 4-star kid, the highest rated quarterback in MAC history, my sophomore year. So we're constantly bringing in new talent. So if you're not growing and developing, that's when you should be worried, not worried about Coach Ciarrocca not coaching you up or not giving you the opportunity.
Can you talk a little bit more scheme-wise about what he kind of prefers? I know, obviously, at Minnesota last year was like a run-heavy offense. Back in 2019, it was a completely different-looking offense. Like, you actually got to spend quite some time with him. What is his like most desirable scheme, I guess, or is it just based on personnel?
I mean, that's really hard to say because you got to look back even before me. If you look at some of his offenses in Delaware, they were really diverse. Joe Flacco under center, drop back, and launch the ball. He had a pretty much all running quarterback before Joe. So he's had pretty much every style of quarterback. That's where I said at the beginning, he's adaptable with personnel. I think he definitely wants to be in wants to win the time of possession. I know for a fact that's what he wants to do. He wants to run the ball. He wants to establish the run, but so does every offense. I know in college football, you get a little bit pass happy with a lot of these offenses, but look at the most successful teams. They have an effective running game. And especially if you guys do have a young quarterback room, he's got to focus on the run because that takes a lot of pressure off these guys. And, that's the key is establishing the line of scrimmage. And that's why you see Minnesota win in the fourth quarter. That's why you saw our offense winning in the fourth quarter is the physicality. But I don't know what your guys' offensive line outlook looks like, but that will be his first objective. Will be recruiting and building that offensive line because they're going to need that to run the style of offense that I think he would prefer. But like I said, he's very adaptable. So I wouldn't put it against him. If you guys have a running quarterback and a bad offensive line, it wouldn't surprise me if he spread it out 5 wide and let the quarterback just run. I mean, he can do it all. So I don't worry about that with Coach Ciarrocca and his arsenal of offenses.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to need to be creative because while we have improved at basically every position on offense the last few years, it's still not good enough to where we need to be in the Big Ten. And I think Schiano's addressed that. And there's no ambiguity there. They know that it has to improve. And they've gotten a lot of young offensive linemen from the high school ranks and some transfer portal guys. So we expect continued improvement. But let's talk about like what a quarterback's meeting is like with Coach Ciarrocca. So does he kind of like run some plays up on a board, like ask you what you like? Like how does that offense kind of take shape and how much do players have involvement with that creation of an offense year to year?
Oh, it's Kirk's show. Let's not beat around the bush. It's definitely his show and he's earned it. Frankly, he has done it at a high level now for a really long time. He got a bad shake at Penn State. That was not his fault, but he was the scapegoat for that, unfortunately. But he is one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. There's no doubt about it. He's proven it at multiple locations in places where offense was not important. Western's had a pretty good history of offense, but, he took it to a whole nother level. And then Minnesota, what he's able to do with that team is impressive. So, I think in a meeting room, he definitely commands the room. But one thing that I love about him is he teaches. He's a teacher. I think there's a difference between teaching and coaching. And teaching is where like he really will get down to the basics. Where he gets the guys up on the whiteboard on a consistent basis, and he's constantly challenging them. And that's one thing. Even as a fifth-year senior, he was constantly challenging me. Now he'll definitely take. Feedback from the players, and he'll definitely ask you what you like and include you in decisions. But he's earned the right to call the plays that he wants to call. And I think he would always say, at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one that gets fired if these plays don't work. So I'm going to be the one to call them. So I think that there's a lot of that. But he does, you watch what Tanner Morgan was able to do, and he was basically an extension of the offense and as an offensive coordinator on the field. And the same way as me, is he teaches his offense so thoroughly and so well that you can't help but become part of, the solution, not the problem. And you become, an offensive coordinator to where you're able to coach and teach just like he is. So I think that's where they'll get to at some point. I know he will, or he'll do everything in his power to get you guys there. Ultimately, it's up to the players, but it'll be interesting to see. He's getting older too, so I think a lot of it has changed with the younger players from what I've heard. I know he let Tanner do a lot more than he even let me do, so I'm sure he's gotten better in that aspect.
So let's talk about your personal story. What were some of the main things that Kirk Ciarrocca as a coach really helped you improve and get you to the level that you got in college, where you were one of the best quarterbacks in the country by the time your senior year rolled around?
Yeah, there's no doubt I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I was able to do without Coach Ciarrocca. I would say, in terms of talent scale, I'm not nearly as talented as a lot of the guys you see playing on Saturdays and Sundays now. But the way that he's able to maximize what talent you do have and be able to form an offense around those talents is really impressive. I'm definitely not a big arm guy. I'm not the fastest guy. I'm not the tallest. I like to refer myself as the king of the twos, too short, too slow, all those. But, we were able to have a really effective offense built around me and my strengths, which is my brain. And, we were a complex offense that was able to run the ball pretty effectively. But, I threw for over 12,000 yards in my career, which, there's only a handful of guys that were able to do that. But when I left, now there's a lot more. There's only continuing to be more guys. But when I was done, there wasn't a lot of guys with 12,000 yards passing. So, we definitely were multiple, but he's just so good at developing and constantly teaching and coaching. But you definitely feel, he's an East Coast guy, but you definitely feel the love from Coach Ciarrocca. And you know that he loves and cares about you. And that's one of the most overlooked aspects of a coach. Is, people think that you get yelled at and screamed at and you get, coached hard on a consistent basis, but there's nobody that cares more than him. And that's something that's really important. And what makes him special and how he's able to pull the most out of me, for sure.
So you're obviously very fond of Coach. Give me your best story about him. There's got to be one funny one or one serious one. You can do both if you want.
Well, I got to keep it PG. He is an East Coast guy, so there's a 4-letter word that's very involved in their English vocabulary. But I could always tell when it was a special day for Coach Ciarrocca, whether it was his birthday or some type of anniversary, because he would always randomly in the meeting be like, "Hey, let's go to Dairy Queen," and we never left the meeting room early ever. We were always the first in, last out. All the time. But I knew if we were going to get some tasty treats or if he was chewing on a cigar, that it was some type of special occasion. So that's one thing that I can forewarn the future quarterbacks of. If you see him chewing on a cigar or if he tries to take you to get some type of savory sweet,
Hey guys, unfortunately, we had a bit of a technical difficulty. We lost part of Zach's video feed. So his video and audio, the last portion of the interview actually didn't upload. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but he was an awesome guest. He gave some really insightful answers, and I kind of wanted to touch on the last two questions we asked him because I thought he gave fantastic answers to it. The first one was about designing an offense around players' strengths and also dealing with, how do you keep a ton of talented players happy, because that Western Michigan team in 2015, 2016, they had a ton of NFL talent. They had 3 NFL receivers. They had 3 offensive tackles that went on to the NFL. They had a defense, this outside of Ciarrocca's, wheelhouse, but they had a defense full of NFL players. And he gave a really nuanced answer here. He said that Kirk basically just does a really good job of getting to know players and processing information really well, seeing what guys can do on the practice field, kind of going through concepts with players and understanding what they can and can't handle. he just basically said he has this innate sense for understanding what guys are good at, what they're not good at, how to put those guys in advantageous situations. Because we kind of talked over and over, and you've heard this from a lot of people about Kirk. He's just a guy who assesses his talent, and then he designs offenses around that. And Kirk just sounds like he's a really competent, really capable play caller, and he's just a very gifted offensive mind. The second question we had was, given that the landscape of the NCAA has changed so dramatically in the age of NIL and the transfer portal, basically what they did at Western Michigan in 2016, that couldn't really happen today, because somebody would have, people would have gotten tired of sitting on the bench. He kind of highlighted how good the depth was at Western Michigan. That's one of the main reasons they were so successful. And somebody would have gotten paid. Like Corey Davis probably wouldn't have played 4 years there. He probably would have gotten, these multi-million-dollar offers, given how talented he was. And there's a ton of guys that probably would have gotten huge deals. Zach was mentioning that it's funny that we asked that, because one of his best friends from the team during his time there was the Carolina Panthers offensive tackle Taylor Moton, and he's one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL. He's the right tackle for the Carolina Panthers. He said they were having that exact same conversation, that if they were on the team today, it couldn't have happened. There have been too many people who got poached. People would have left because they wanted to play more. It was just a different era, and it was only 6-7 years ago, and the NCAA has changed so much. He also said, he had a really cool anecdote, that after they won their bowl game in 2015, so his redshirt junior year, this was, the first bowl game that Western Michigan had ever won. He, had all these different records. He's going into his final year there. They had a really, really good team for 2016, but his dad sat him down and he said, listen, here's all your offers. Here's all the coaches that have contacted us. People were trying Power 5 teams. He said he could have probably went anywhere he wanted to in the country. He had so many schools that were pre-recruiting him because it was only grad transfers at that time, and he had graduated in 3.5 years. And people were, a bunch of teams were trying to get him to come to their program and be their starting quarterback for his final year. He had no interest in that. He wanted to stick with his team because he knew how good of a team he had in 2016. But I just thought that was wild that, this is pre-transfer portal, this is pre-NIL. We always knew that college football is a shady business, but he didn't announce he wanted to transfer. He didn't have any interest in doing it, but schools were beating down his door to come play quarterback for them. So it's unfortunate that we couldn't get Zach directly for those final questions, but he was a fantastic guest. Hope to have him on again in the future because he was just amazing. But guys, thank you so much once again for listening. This has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.